Hi everyone, this is Jim with Round 8 coverage from the 2014 U.S. Chess Championship taking place in St. Louis, Missouri. Had another solid round, a lot of exciting games played, but there was one game that really stood out, so there was no question from early on of which game I wanted to show to you guys today. And that's the game I have on the board here. The players with the white pieces, we have Timur Gareev. I haven't talked about him before. Timur is a young player of 26. He's the fourth rated player in the U.S. Among active chess players with a FIDE rating of 2653. And he may be perhaps slightly disappointed with his performance so far because he's at 3.5 points out of the first 7 rounds at 50%. And not really in contention for the leadership poll. So I think he should be, given his rating and his age, he should be one of the contenders for the crown. And so I think he really determined to make a push in this game to see if he could sprint towards the finish line. His opponent here is Alejandro Ramirez with the black pieces. We talked about him briefly before, so let's get to the game. Timur starts out with the move knight f3. And after d5, he plays the move c4, which is the Reti opening. And you may think this is a strange choice, why not play a king's gambit or something like that? But the open games, if you're in a do or die mood, why not play some crazy gambit? Well, we'll see that in a bit, but I just wanted to make the point that the open games, if things open up real early and all the pieces get exposed, sometimes lots of material gets traded off, and then the game ends in a draw because there's not enough force left to really decide the game. So a slower opening can be a way to play for a win when you're in a must-win situation, just trying to keep as much force on the board and putting a lot of pressure on your opponent. But let's wait and see. I don't want to give anything away with the game. Black played d4, which is one of the main moves here, and now b4. And already this game takes on quite an unusual character. These advanced pawns on the queen side, are they a strength or a weakness? Now, black has a couple choices here against this setup. He can play the move g6, just trying to get his bishop to g7, supporting the pawn, or he can play the move f6 with 2 ideas in mind. One is to build up this pawn chain to support the e-pawn, and also limiting the squares that this knight can go to. So that's a move that's in the opening book, and white plays the main move here, e3, and black continues with e5, just supporting the center. And now it's not good. It's white's turn to move, and it's not good to take the pawn. You might think, having played e3, you want to play e takes d4 and undermine the center, as is typical in these flank openings. But in this case, black has the move e4, which drives the knight back. There's no good squares for the knight, and actually the best move is knight back to g1, and black starts to get a strong initiative. So that's not played, not considered good. Instead, white plays the main move here, c5, and black plays the move a5, going after the pawns on the queen side, not letting them get established and taking advantage of this weak, undefended b4 pawn. So now, even here in this somewhat unusual position, this is still a position that's been played before, and in fact there is a known drawing line here, which white can draw with the move knight takes e5. So this is a little tactical warm-up for the game, a variation that might have happened, and if white was going for a draw, it's pretty much forced from this point. Black needs to take the knight, otherwise he's just down a pawn, and then queen here check. And now notice, of course, black can't play g6 because of queen e5 check. There's a fork winning the rook in the corner. So the king has to move. And the king, probably the best move for the king to put up the biggest fight is to go to d7. If he goes to e7, the queen will take with check, and then he goes to d7 anyway to avoid a repetition. But there's no way to avoid the repetition. The queen goes over here to f5, and now black has to go back, and we get this repetition draw. So that's the forced draw. If we back up, queen here, king here, queen to f5 check. If the king tries to run to c6, this is actually losing. This is the only other choice, and it loses because of the move b5. Notice the bishop over here on f1 is supporting the pawn on b5. And the king takes on c5, then bishop to a6 is a skewer. The king has to get out of the way. Where can he go? He has to go to b6, the only move. It's another funny line. If the king goes here, this is mate in one with the pawn, and the king is checkmated in the middle of the board. So the king has to go here, and then queen takes bishop. He is, well, white's just a pawn up, and black's king is, white is a piece up. Black's king is exposed, and the attack continues. Well, let me count the pieces again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. No, I guess white got a piece back that he had sacrificed. But anyway, white's just winning in this position. So let's back up. Was there any other try here after b5 check? There is the move king to d5, but this is worse. And another interesting tactic here, knight to c3 check. And if you take, then queen here check. King goes over, and then queen takes queen. So chasing black's king to the center of the board and then taking advantage of the unprotected pieces on the back rank. That seems to be the theme here. So anyway, that would have been a draw if white wanted to play for one with knight takes e5. But Timur is not playing for a draw here. He's playing for a win, and he goes with the move bishop to c4, which is a pawn sacrifice. So we do get a sacrifice, but with the pieces all on the board. So after a takes b4, now he takes d4, and e4 is still a move here, could be played, but Ramirez chose to exchange on e4. White castles, and after castling, bishop takes c5, and white has sacrificed not one but 2 pawns. So it was a very casual kind of move, sacrifice the castling, giving up 2 pawns. And what is white's compensation? Well, his king is definitely safer than black's king. It's castled, 2 pieces are developed, and white's pawns are a bit peculiar. You know, maybe one of them will get scooped up, and then there'll just be a 1 pawn deficit. But still, it's a risk to play 2 pawns down. If your attack fades, then black has a 1 game with being 2 pawns up. So precise moves are needed, and knight h4 is played here, which is actually the best move in the position. So there's some interesting, very, very highly accurate moves are played here in the opening parts of the game. And now, what is black to do? Now the chess engine, in looking at this position, thinks black still has maybe just a slight edge, so it thinks that white's compensation is not quite worth 2 pawns, but nearly. So just a very slight edge to black, and only if he plays the correct move, which is g6, and that's what Alejandro played. Of course, it's a logical move, just keeping the knight out of this square. But I don't know, the bishop was covering that square already, and there were many other moves that black had to choose from. It's always interesting to see how strong these grandmasters are to find the moves that keep them in the game. Okay, so d3 was played here, and now a kind of a peculiar move, but this rook check is coming, and there's no way to avoid it. And this move is actually one of the top choices of the chess engine again, king to f8, just getting away from trouble, out of any potential checks and tempo gains from the white pieces. There was also maybe queen to e2 as a check was an idea as well. So it's white's turn to move, just casually developing with knight d2. It's just interesting how white can play this way, even 2 pawns down, but he just doesn't have enough pieces out to launch that mating attack that he wants to. He needs to get some more force in the game, and he needs to get the knights nearer to the king. So and of course, black needs to mobilize his defenses. His biggest problem in the long run is can he get these pieces out and active in time before the attack from white lands. So it's a very long distance attack, and difficult to evaluate for both humans and also for computers. Okay, white plays knight to e4, just continuing to move forward with his pieces, and now he's in proximity of the f6, putting pressure on the f6 pawn, which is well defended, but if you can attack it, it will keep black's pieces tied down, and there may be an idea of the bishop coming in here now with the knight out of the way. So the attack is starting to shape up in some respects. Bishop to e7 was played. The knight here was attacking the bishop, so it has to retreat. And now f4. just launching a pawn towards the black king and trying to soften up the king side here. And now knight a5. And once again, a top choice, the computer engine. And the engine still thinks black is better. It doesn't think, it's just a little bit skeptical that white has enough compensation for the pawn, but not a whole lot better. Now, white continues with the move bishop takes, getting rid of this defender of the f6 pawn, and the king side generally. Black takes with the rook. And now f5, disrupting the pawns around the king, or attempting to. So right here is where it's the first time I think black has been playing pretty much the ideal defense up until this point. And if you think you think it was easy to come up with all those moves, you're wrong. That was really tough. But finally, at this point, Ramirez falters and doesn't find the best move. So there's one best move once again in this position, which is king to g7. And you know, this is one of the secrets of attacking chess: is you can be playing this position which is not objectively sound, but your opponent really has to find the best way to defend. And if there's only one way to defend, and he can't find it in time because you're under time pressure, you have to find it within a finite period of time, then you can just suddenly win the game. So Ramirez plays a move which is not a first choice but a second choice, and now all of a sudden the chess engine starts changing its mind and thinks that the game is about even here. So starting with this move bishop to h6 check, you can start to see why king g7 might have been a good idea. Keep the bishop out of this square. But Ramirez has the idea that the king can actually run to safety over here on the queen side, which is pretty interesting. And that also gives some freedom to the rook. So at some point, this rook can maybe make some progress and get into the game, I mean. So queen to e2 was played. Putting the queen on this line against the king. Maybe with the idea of some point unleashing an attack against the against the bishop. And in fact, there's an immediate threat, right? Because knight takes f6 would take advantage of this pin and fork the king and the rook. So g5 was played here. And after g5, the chess engine, and even before g5, actually, the chess engine is starting to like white's position. So even 2 pawns down, it's starting to think white has a pretty good game. And now white sacrifices even more material. But this sacrifice is entirely approved by the engine, because giving up the bishop for that pawn allows queen to h5 check. And but the king is still has ideas of escaping to the queen side here. So king goes to d7, and now f6, pushing the pawn forward. And this is just a really strong move, and maybe considered the justification for white's play so far. And at this point, white's advantage has grown to the point where maybe it's even a winning advantage at this point. Of course, it's really complicated, and that all depends on both sides finding the correct moves. So the first thing to note about this position, we'll take a look at a few variations here, is that you can't take that pawn with the bishop. Because of queen to f7 check. Okay, it forks the bishop and the rook in a way. So for example, if the queen, well, I won't even put that on the board. If the queen goes there, then you can just take the rook. So that's not playable. If the bishop comes back to block the check, then queen to d5 is pretty devastating. Let's see, if the king runs, king to e8, then queen takes g8 check. Okay, so you pick up the rook. So the king needs to stay there. If you interpose with the rook, however, or even the bishop, this is actually losing. There's a mate in 2 here. Check with the knight. The king has only one move, and now this is checkmate. The queen is supported by the rook on the f7 square. The knight is guarding the escape square. And in this position, if you block with the bishop, it's the same thing, because the bishop is pinned against the king, so you can still play knight c5 check, and king goes to d8, and queen f7 is mate once again. So that's not playable. So let's back up. One move, maybe it's a slightly better try, still doesn't quite work out, is you could consider as black giving back some material by taking with the rook. Now this is not good either. Knight takes f6, so white gets some material back. Bishop takes f6, and now once again queen f7 check. And let's see, what can the engine is giving king moves or bishop moves, but the bishop move is losing once again to queen e5 check here. King goes back to e8, then you take the rook, and if the bishop blocks, then rook to f7 check is pretty devastating. What can happen here? Oh, the queen is sacrificed. If the king goes to e8, then rook e1 check. The other rook gets into the game, and it's game over. So not really very good. Let's see. So after rook takes, knight takes, bishop takes, queen f7 check. The best defense is for the king to start running, and after rook takes bishop, we have a situation where white has material. He's got the queen, 2 rooks, and a knight versus a queen, 1 rook, and 2 pieces. So white is pretty much up material at this point and chasing the king. So white is winning. So that's not really playable either. And so Ramirez finds the best move in this position, which is not to take the pawn at all, but to leave it there and play bishop to d6, putting up a little shield for the king and hoping to deal with that pawn in a minute. And now rook a to c1, cutting off the king escape to the c file, and maybe with ideas of bringing the rook into the game somewhere on the c file, or supporting the knight to c5. Black plays the move c5, top choice, and then knight to f5 is played, bringing the knights closer to the king, just kind of creeping in. The king runs to c7, so now this c5 move has provided a bit of a shield for the king, and maybe he can run to safety on the king side. If he can get to safety, if we look at the material, white is down an entire piece, so if the king can get to safety, then black is just going to win the game. So white needs to strike here. And now, well, okay, I can't say just yet. This is one of the top choices. Queen takes h7. The chess engine is giving white a winning advantage here, definitely winning. So but it's still complicated. Bishop to d7, defending against the check. And now knight f takes d6 was played. Rook takes d6, willing to give back the exchange. If the rook and the knight disappear, it'll be a queen and 2 rooks against a queen, a rook, and 2 pieces, with a slight edge for black in terms of material, although with a bit of a messed up pawn structure and exposed king and some weaknesses here, because these kingside pawns for white are going to become very strong. But from a material point of view, it's not a bad idea to give back some material and trying to get to a safer spot. Now there's a couple moves here that work, that are the best moves, that really kind of put the game away. So let's show these moves. These were not played. So I think what I said about the defender, in a way it also applies to the attacker. When you're attacking in a position like this and you're down material, you really have to justify your attack in some way. And so you have to spend your time to find the most accurate move that really justifies the attack. And if you find a move that's second rate, sometimes your attack will just peter out. So depending on the nature of the attack, the moves may or may not be that easy to find. And so you start burning time on the clock, and if you play any second-rate moves, you know you're in trouble. So time pressure works both ways, and we'll see that coming up pretty soon. They've been thinking pretty hard. They're on move 25, and the time control isn't until move 40, so they've got to get through another 15 moves. So keeping that in mind, the best move is either knight takes rook or f7, and actually the variations are the same because they transpose. So let's say knight takes rook, king takes, and f7. This forces the rook to f8. There's no other square for it, and he has to block the pawn anyway. And now queen to h6 check, hitting the king. King drops back to c7, and rook takes c5 check. And the attack crashes through. Notice that this check forks the king and the knight, so the knight has to move and block the check, otherwise there's a big loss of material. And now rook takes g5, and the threats on the king side are actually too much with these 3 connected passed pawns, one of which is far advanced. And the material, if we count the pawns, it's actually 5 pawns to 3, and black has 2 pieces for one of the rooks. So white is material up in this situation and has a strong passed pawn and threats to the exposed black king. So white is winning here, and that would have been best play for white. And you could have gotten to the same position by either f7 first and then taking the knight, or taking the knight and then f7. Instead, rook takes c5 was played. Similar idea, but just in a slightly different move order. But it looks good. You know, it's a forcing move. It hits the king, hits the rook, and it still leaves white with an advantage, but not quite as strong an advantage as before. So, like before, excuse me, after rook takes c5, knight to c6 is really the only move that can be played here. And now f7. So we've seen some of these ideas before. Rook here, and rook takes g5. So he gets the pawn, but he hasn't grabbed the exchange, which maybe he should do and still has the opportunity to. But in these circumstances, the chess engine is recommending rook to e6, just getting out of the exchange, away from the threat of the exchange, and it thinks that white is still better, but you know, black is in the game, and it's not as clear cut as the other variation. Instead, black played bishop to e6, going after this f7 pawn, which is definitely a thorn in his side, and rook to g8 is played, best move, and now rook to d7. So the rook has moved away from the being taken by the knight, so black keeps his material and puts more pressure on the f-pawn. Hold on just a second. I'm curious about why rook g8 is the best move here when he could have played knight takes d6 and picked up the exchange here. Here, queen takes g5. I'm sorry, queen takes g5. Okay, yeah, so after after rook takes g5, yeah, the queen is on that, so the knight is tied down defending the rook. So the knight can't go and grab the rook on d6. So that was the advantage of the other move order. So that's also why rook, after bishop e6, rook to g8 is a good move. Gets the rook out from the glare of the queen and frees the knight up, so it's actually threatening to take the rook. This rook drops back to d7, and now knight to c5. Hitting the rook again, so looks like after bishop takes a2, looks like white gets that rook anyway. So rook takes g8 was played here, and rather than taking back the knight, this is actually a good move. So let me check just a second to see if taking the knight was any better. No, taking the knight is not really good here. After rook takes, if queen takes, yeah, we have rook takes f8 and cancel that. And if king takes, we have queen to g7. Okay, going after this rook. And it looks like this will result in the win of material over here for white. Okay, so bishop takes a2 was played, knight takes d7, and now rook takes g8, the best move for black. Now, once again, white has a couple different ways to play it. He can take the knight, so, take the rook and queen. And bishop takes, queen to g7. So we have a queen, a rook, and a knight against a queen, a bishop, and a knight, so white is up the exchange with material even. This is very similar to what happened in the game. And are there other options there after? Yeah, that's it for that one. What he played instead was push the pawn forward and became a queen this way. So rook takes f8 and knight takes f8, check, with discovered check towards the king, and queen to e7, blocking. And white at this point could just trade queens, and in fact the chess engine really likes that. Thinks queen takes e7 and knight takes e7 is the way to go here. But this is a very dangerous way to play because of these advanced pawns here. So I can understand, if you don't have time to fully calculate this out to the end, you're going to avoid this kind of variation because you have to be sure your pieces can get organized and stop the pawn in time. And this bishop is already guarding the queening square of the c-pawn, and it's just 3 moves away from becoming a queen. So a very risky way to play, and Timur chose to keep the queen on. And I think we're on move 33, so there's 7 moves to go before the time control, and both players are really low on time at this point, so we can't expect the most accurate play. And I think what both players are going for is to kind of keep themselves in the game and wait until they get to the point where they make the time control and have time to consider the position. So keeping all the material on, just trying to hold on to things. Queen g6 keeps the pawns protected. The knight is protected by the rook, and just asks black to find a move. Black plays the bishop to d5. I'm bringing it back, and you might think it was a bit extravagant to grab that pawn over here on a2 when he was under attack, but on the other hand, now black has these counter threats, so generating counterplay when you're under attack is really, really key. And white's advantage is slowly diminishing because of not being able to find and play the best moves in time trouble. Once again, queen f5, kind of a nothing move, just sitting on the position, holding on to everything, and trying to make the time control. Queen to e3, cancel that. Queen to e3. Here, check. King goes to h1. White is still avoiding trading. I think white's got the idea that the winning chances lie with keeping the queens on the board. Although, as I showed earlier, the chess engine thought it was fine to just trade down to that endgame and win that way. Now the bishop is hanging. Black plays the move queen to e2, hitting the rook. Rook goes to g1, and now queen to e5. Cancel that. Queen to e5. Offering a queen trade once again. The queen drops back to f1, just holding on to things. Everything's protected. Queen to d6. And queen to f2. And b3. Now we're on move 38. Cancel that. Getting myself confused. b3. And this move here starts to put the question to white's strategy. While he has just been trying to hold on to things and make the time control, and then go for his big push after he's got it all figured out, black has actually made a little bit of progress. He's moved this b pawn 1 step forward, closer to becoming a queen. It's supported by the bishop. Now the b1 square is covered, so not an immediate threat, but definitely a problem. And so h3 is played, providing a little lift for the king if needed. Queen to h6. And queen to g3 check. And king to b6. And now both sides have made the time control. This is move 40 after king b6. And the chess engine evaluation has changed because of that sequence of moves where they were playing quickly to 0-0-0. So the winning game that white had earlier is now gone. But Gareev continues to play in an enterprising fashion, trying to put pressure, keep the pressure on black. Plays the move knight d7. King comes forward to b5. So he drove the king forward, which is a bit double-edged. Maybe the king is a bit more exposed over here, but also maybe the king coming forward will actually help this pawn promote. White plays king to h2, getting the king off the back rank and away from any possible back rank checks when these pawns promote. And now knight to b4, hitting c3, and queen to e5, pinning the bishop and indirectly defending c3 because bishop, queen takes bishop. The knight is needed to defend the bishop there. So black plays the queen over to e6, offering to trade queens, and white declines with the move queen to c7. But actually, this was a mistake, and I don't know how much time Ramirez had to think about this, but he actually could have gotten a winning advantage here with a couple of moves. One of them is simply just to take the pawn on d3, And just with this mass of unopposed pawns on the queen side, be in excellent shape. I guess, well, let's look at it a little bit. After knight takes, the queen can't take the pawn on b7. That's defended. And what's the best try? The best try is rook c1, trying to block the pawn. Yeah, but basically black has just picked up a pawn and is now in the driver's seat, having an advantage. But there was an even stronger move here, which would be hard to find, actually, without the help of a computer, is the move knight a6. And the funny thing is that, of course, this is hitting the queen, and the queen can't just go anywhere because it's needed to defend the knight. So the queen can't run away to, like the computer is suggesting queen e5, just giving up immediately. But the point of it, I guess, is that there's wherever the queen goes to try and hold on to the knight, there's a problem. So these squares are covered, so the queen can't go to those squares and hold on to the knight. So that leaves this square could try to go to c8 and defend the knight from that square. But now there's bishop to c6, and the knight is pinned. If the knight goes to where it defends the queen, then queen to d6 check first, a tempo move. And then the king moves or pawn moves, and then black can pick up the knight. So that loses the knight. And similarly, if the queen tries to go to d8 and hold on to the knight from that square, there's a move. Well, first queen d6 check. These tempo moves are really important. Again, king h1 or g3 are about the same. And now knight c5. And this knight is pinned. There's no move that it has that defends the queen. And so white is just losing that piece after knight a5. But again, that's a hard move to find. And particularly when you've been under pressure the whole game, you're really just thinking about defensive moves. And so black played the natural move, queen c6, and white, perhaps sensing that he had gotten into some trouble there, acquiesces to the exchange. So queen takes, king takes, and the game is back in the range of about even. Continues knight to e5 check, and king to d6, hitting the knight, and now knight c4 check. And black at this point decides to exchange out, takes the knight, and then plays d3, getting these dangerous passed pawns rolling. So it's a knight against a rook, same number of pawns. So from a material point of view, the material is definitely in white's favor, and also white has these connected passed pawns, which are very strong in the long run. But in the short run, these pawns are both much quicker and closer to the goal line. So they're really the dominating factor here, and it's enough to give black compensation and maybe even a slight edge in some cases. So, but the game continues. h4 and b2, getting those pawns rolling immediately. h5, and now the king needs to stay inside the square of the pawn. The king goes to e7, so I can stop that guy. Rook to f1, cutting the king off and now threatening the queen again. Knight to c2. So this says, okay, I'm going to let you queen a pawn, but I can queen a pawn too. And we'll watch this race unfold. h6, knight to e3, hitting the rook. Now, of course, if white just pushes a pawn, it's knight takes rook, followed by, with check, followed by this pawn queening. And actually, black would be winning, I think, in that situation. Maybe white has time to queen the pawn. But let's see, the best move here, actually, let's go ahead and check that. Since I mentioned the variation, let's check it. If he had pushed, yeah, the problem is this goes with check. The king drops back, and then this queens. And now, even though this guy queens, this is a winning advantage. Knight e3 check. Okay. So just by the tempo of queening first and having the knight, black is winning in that line. So that can't be played. Rook b1 was played, just getting in front of this pawn and holding it up for a second. But now the other pawn moves forward, d2. So h7, and this guy queens. The rook takes it, the knight takes it. Now white queens first, but black queens. And so the game continues. We've gotten rid of the queens, and then the queens have magically reappeared. And and it's white's turn to move here. Black has some sort of nominal advantage with a knight and a pawn versus two pawns, but he has the open king, and it's really difficult to do anything in this position. He tries moving the king to d5 after that check, to f7 after the check. Now queen d5 checks again. He goes back. Black realizes there's no safety over here. The queen checks just can't be stopped. Queen goes here, check. King goes to d7. Once again, there's no escape after queen d5 check. He decides to repeat moves, so king e7, and the game was drawn here. If he had continued to go to the queen side, he can march all the way over to here. But there's no way to escape the checks. White has this classic pattern of checking from here and here, and that'll be a simple perpetual check. So there's just no way out of this, and the game ended in a draw. So a very exciting game. Certainly both players gave it their best effort, but for Timur it didn't result in anything more than half a point, so he continues at 50%. For the tournament as a whole, Varuzhin Akobian won today, so he's just set a tremendous place. He's actually won pace. He's won 4 games in a row and now has 6 out of 8. Gadakomsky, who was half a point behind after the last round, drew his game, so now he's a full point behind at 5 out of 8. Alexander Linderman won his game, nice game, and gained, well, actually kept pace, I guess, with Akobian. He was a point behind, and he's still a point behind. So both Alex Linderman and Gadakomsky are at 5 out of 8, 1 point behind the leader. And Josh Friedel and Daniel Naroditsky are tied for third place at 4.5 out of 8, with half point further behind. So 3 more rounds to go. The tension continues to build. Can Varuzhin maintain the tremendous pace that he set recently? Can he maintain his lead, or will one of the other one of the other laggards manage to catch up before the final round? Okay, stay tuned. I'll be bringing you coverage of these succeeding rounds. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.